The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline peaks of Valdris Prime, when Captain Sarah Chen first laid eyes on the creature that would change everything. Her survey ship had crash-landed 3 days ago, its hull cracked open like an egg against the alien mountainside. The distress beacon was dead, the communication array scattered across half a kilometer of rocky terrain, and her chances of rescue were dropping faster than the planet's twin suns each evening. She had been searching for shelter when she found the cave. It wasn't the cave itself that stopped her cold, but what lived inside it. The dragon was massive, easily 30 meters from snout to tail, with scales that gleamed like fresh snow in the filtered light. Its eyes were the color of winter storms, pale blue-white with flecks of silver that seemed to move like clouds. When those eyes fixed on her, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. "Well," she whispered to herself, checking that her sidearm was still holstered. "This is new." The dragon didn't move to attack. Instead, it regarded her with what could only be described as curiosity. Its great head tilted slightly, and when it spoke, Sarah nearly jumped out of her environmental suit. "Another sky-falling visitor," the dragon said, its voice a rumbling bass that seemed to come from the very stones around them. "Though you are different from the others." Sarah's training kicked in. First contact protocols: stay calm, establish communication, don't show fear. "You can speak Standard Galactic?" she asked, taking a cautious step forward. "I have had much time to learn languages," the dragon replied. 3,000 of your years, to be precise. The traders who sometimes crash here are usually quite willing to teach, especially when they realize I mean them no harm. 3,000 years. Sarah's mind reeled. Most spacefaring species had lifespans measured in decades, not millennia. "You've been here that long?" The dragon's expression shifted, and Sarah caught something she hadn't expected. Sadness. Deep, profound sadness that seemed to weigh down the creature's massive frame. "I have been here much longer than that, small Skywalker. But for 3,000 years I have been grounded." It was then that Sarah noticed what her shock had prevented her from seeing before. The dragon's wings, magnificent as they appeared, bore old scars. Thick, ropey tissue ran along the wing membranes, and one wing hung at an odd angle. These weren't fresh injuries, they were ancient. Healed, but never properly set. "You're hurt," she said, the observation slipping out before she could stop it. The dragon's laugh was like distant thunder, observant for a small thing. "Yes, I am hurt. Have been for 3 millennia. A battle with what you might call pirates, raiders from the Corvan Empire. They sought to claim this world for its rare minerals. I disagreed with their assessment. You fought them alone. I was younger then and perhaps more foolish. I believed that my strength alone would be enough." The dragon shifted, and Sarah could see the pain the movement caused. "I drove them off, but at great cost. My wings were shattered, my ability to fly stolen. I have been bound to this cave, this mountain ever since." Sarah found herself stepping closer, her fear replaced by something else. Professional curiosity mixed with genuine sympathy. As a xenobiologist by training and a ship's captain by necessity, she had seen many wounded creatures. But never anything like this. "Haven't others tried to help? You said traders come through here. They come, they go. Most flee when they see me. Those who stay long enough to speak offer sympathy, but little else. What can be done for bones that healed wrong 3,000 years ago? What hope is there for wings that no longer remember how to catch the wind?" The despair in the creature's voice was heartbreaking. Sarah found herself studying the wing damage more closely, her scientific mind beginning to work. The dragon noticed her scrutiny. "You look at me differently than the others," he observed. "What do you see that they do not?" "I see a complex fracture pattern that healed without proper alignment," Sarah said, her voice taking on the clinical tone she used when discussing difficult cases. "I see muscle atrophy from disuse, but not complete degradation." "I see." She paused, hardly believing what she was thinking. "I see something that might be fixable." The dragon's eyes widened, and for a moment something like hope flickered in their depths before being quickly suppressed. "Do not speak of impossible things, Skywalker. I have had 3,000 years to accept my fate. My name is Sarah," she said firmly, "and I'm not most people. I'm a trauma surgeon who got tired of treating the same injuries over and over, so I became a xenobiologist. Then I got tired of catalog work, so I became a ship's captain, and right now I'm a crash victim with nothing but time and a very interesting problem to solve." The dragon stared at her for a long moment. "I am called Zephyr," he said finally, though it has been long since that name held any meaning. Well, Zephyr, here's what I think. Those wings of yours are magnificent, but they're also a mechanical structure. Bones, muscles, tendons, they follow the same basic principles regardless of species. And humans? We've gotten very good at fixing things that everyone else says can't be fixed. Even after 3,000 years, Sarah grinned, feeling the first spark of real excitement she'd had since the crash, especially after 3,000 years. We're stubborn like that. For the first time since she'd entered the cave, the dragon's posture straightened slightly. What would you need? First, I need to do a proper examination. Then I need supplies, equipment. My ship's medical bay is wrecked, but the fabrication unit might still be operational, and I need you to trust me. Zephyr considered this. Trust comes hard when you have been disappointed for 3 millennia. I understand. But here's the thing about humans. We don't just fix what's broken. We make it better than it was before. Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. How would you like to not just fly again, but fly better than you ever have? The cave fell silent except for the sound of Zephyr's breathing. When he spoke again, his voice carried something it hadn't held for 3,000 years. Hope. Tell me more, Sarah Chen. The examination took 6 hours. Sarah had seen complex trauma before, but never anything quite like this. Zephyr's wing structure was unlike anything in her xenobiology databases. The bones were hollow but incredibly strong, designed for both power and flexibility. The membrane stretched between elongated finger-like projections was torn in 17 places and had healed with thick scar tissue that completely disrupted the aerodynamic profile. This is fascinating, Sarah muttered, running her scanner along the wing's leading edge. Your bone density is off the charts, but the structure is designed for incredible flexibility. These aren't just wings, they're engineering marvels. Zephyr had remained patient throughout the examination, though she could see the strain it cost him to extend his damaged wings for her inspection. The dragon kind were made for the sky, he said simply. To be grounded is to be incomplete. I can see that. Your entire physiology is built around flight. Your heart, your lung capacity, even your muscle distribution. Sarah paused at a particularly nasty scar. What exactly hit you here? Plasma cannon. The Corvin use crude but effective weapons. They did not expect resistance from what they saw as a primitive world. They clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. Sarah finished her scan and sat back on her heels. Okay, here's what I've found. The good news is that your bones, while improperly set, are incredibly strong. The bad news is that the muscle memory and flexibility you've lost can't be restored through conventional healing. Zephyr's expression darkened. Then it is as I thought, impossible. I didn't say impossible. I said conventional healing won't work. Sarah's grin was sharp. Humans gave up on conventional a long time ago. What you need isn't just healing, you need complete reconstruction. She pulled up the holographic display from her scanner, showing a 3-dimensional model of Zephyr's wing structure. Look at this. The fractures here, here, and here need to be rebroken and properly set. The scar tissue needs to be completely removed, and the membrane regrown. And these muscle groups need to be retrained from scratch. That sounds extensive. It's going to be the most complex surgery I've ever attempted. But here's where human stubbornness comes in handy. We've been dealing with supposedly impossible medical cases for centuries. We've regrown hearts, rebuilt spines, even restored sight to species that were born blind. Zephyr studied the hologram with growing interest. How would you accomplish such a thing? Sarah was already moving, her excitement building as the plan formed in her mind. First, we salvage what we can from my ship. The medical fabricator is damaged, but the bioprinter should still work. We'll need to create a complete genetic map of your tissue, both damaged and healthy. Then we use that to grow replacement membrane material. And the bones? That's where it gets interesting. Human medicine developed something called programmable bone restructuring about 50 years ago. We inject nanoscaffolds that gradually dissolve old bone material while building new, properly aligned structures. It's like renovating a building while you're still living in it. The dragon's eyes gleamed. This nanoscaffold, it would work on dragon physiology? Unknown. But that's what makes this fun. Sarah was already heading toward the cave entrance. The beauty of the system is that it adapts to whatever bone structure it encounters. The nanites read your genetic code and rebuild according to your own biological blueprint. They made their way down the treacherous mountain path to where Sarah's ship lay broken against the rocks. The crash had split the vessel nearly in half, but the aft section where the medical bay was located appeared intact. Impressive craftsmanship, Zephyr observed, examining the wreckage, though perhaps not suited for atmospheric entry. It wasn't designed for crash landings, Sarah admitted, crawling through a gap in the hull. But the important parts should still be functional. The medical bay was a mess, but as she'd hoped, the core systems were still operational. The bioprinter hummed to life when she activated it, and the genetic sequencer showed green across all systems. Most importantly, the nanofabrication unit that produced the bone restructuring scaffolds was undamaged. "This is going to work," she breathed, pulling up the system diagnostics. "Zephyr, I need tissue samples, bone, muscle, membrane, and blood. The machines need to learn your biological signature before we can start fabricating repair materials." The sample collection took another 2 hours. Zephyr proved remarkably cooperative, though Sarah could see the pain each movement caused him. When she finally had everything she needed, she began the complex process of programming the bioprinter. "The membrane is going to be the trickiest part," she explained as she worked. "Dragon wing membrane has properties I've never seen before. It's incredibly strong, but also flexible enough to change shape during flight. The bioprinter will need time to analyze the molecular structure." "How long will this process take?" Sarah paused in her typing. "That's the part you're not going to like. The nanoscaffolds work slowly to avoid rejection. We're looking at 3 months minimum for the bone restructuring, another month for the membrane regeneration, and then physical therapy to retrain your flight muscles." 4 months, Zephyr said quietly. "Minimum, possibly longer if we run into complications." Sarah turned to face him. "I need you to understand this isn't just surgery. This is experimental xenobiology on a scale that's never been attempted. There are no guarantees." Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, staring at the broken wreckage around them. 3,000 years ago, I fought to protect this world because I believed in something worth defending. I have spent every day since wondering if that sacrifice meant anything. It did. You saved this world. But I lost myself in the process. To fly is to be dragon. Without flight, I am merely a large-scaled creature living in a cave." His pale eyes met hers. "What you offer is not just the restoration of my wings. You offer the return of my identity. Then you'll do it?" "I will do it. But I have one condition." Sarah waited. "If this fails, if the pain becomes too great, or if the damage proves beyond even human stubbornness to repair, you must promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you will not see it as failure. Promise me you will know that for the first time in 3 millennia, someone looked at what I had become and saw not a broken creature, but a problem worth solving." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "I promise. But Zephyr, yes? You should know something about humans. We don't just solve problems, we solve them spectacularly. By the time I'm done with you, you're not just going to fly again. You're going to soar." The dragon's laugh echoed through the broken ship, and for the first time in 3,000 years it held no sadness at all. The first injection of nanoscaffolds nearly killed him. Sarah watched in horror as Zephyr's massive frame convulsed, his breathing becoming labored and his pale scales darkening with pain. The monitoring equipment she'd salvaged from the ship screamed warnings as his vital signs spiked dangerously high. "The nanites are being rejected," she muttered, frantically adjusting the biocompatibility settings. "His immune system is treating them as an invasion." "Perhaps," Zephyr gasped between waves of pain, "this was inevitable." "No." Sarah's voice was fierce. "No, this is just the first hurdle. Every species reacts differently to nanomedical technology. We just need to teach your immune system to accept the help." She worked through the night, modifying the nanite programming to match Zephyr's unique physiology. Dragons, she was learning, had immune systems unlike anything in human medical literature. They were designed to resist foreign substances with an intensity that made the human immune response look gentle by comparison. "Your ancestors really didn't trust outside interference, did they?" she asked as she recalibrated the nanites for the 3rd time. "Dragons are particular about what we allow into our bodies," Zephyr admitted. The pain had subsided, but Sarah could see the exhaustion in his ancient eyes. "We live so long that any contamination becomes magnified over centuries. That's actually helpful information. If I program the nanites to mimic your own cellular signature more closely," Sarah's fingers flew over the bioprinter's interface. "They should read as friendly repair cells rather than foreign invaders." The 2nd injection went better. Zephyr's breathing remained steady. and the monitoring equipment showed acceptance rather than rejection. But it was the third injection, administered a week later, that proved the concept would work. "I can feel them," Zephyr said with wonder, "moving through my bones, taking inventory." That's exactly what they're doing. They're mapping every microfracture, every point where the bone healed incorrectly. Sarah checked her readings. In another week, they'll start the actual reconstruction process. The transformation was gradual but remarkable. Sarah had set up a temporary medical station in Zephyr's cave, using equipment salvaged from her ship and supplemented by materials the bioprinter created from local resources. Every day brought new challenges as they worked with physiology that had never been studied by human science. "Your bone density is changing," Sarah observed during one of their daily examinations. "The nanites are actually making your bones stronger than they were originally. How is that possible?" "The scaffolds don't just repair, they optimize. They're using patterns from your healthy bones to create an improved structure. Think of it as renovation using better materials." But the real breakthrough came when they started working on the wing membranes. The bioprinter had spent weeks analyzing the complex protein structures that made up dragon wing leather, finally producing a synthetic material that was chemically identical, but structurally superior. "This is impossible," Zephyr breathed, as Sarah carefully grafted the new membrane material onto his wing frame. "It feels exactly as it should. Better than it should," Sarah corrected. "The new membrane has microchannels that will improve airflow and reduce turbulence. Your ancestors were incredible engineers, but they were working with biological limitations. We're working with biological possibilities." The work was exhausting. Sarah found herself putting in 18-hour days, monitoring Zephyr's progress, adjusting treatments, and dealing with unexpected complications. Dragon physiology presented puzzles that human medicine had never encountered. Their metabolism ran hot enough to damage standard medical equipment. Their cellular regeneration rate was so high that it threatened to overwhelm the nanite programming, and their pain tolerance was so incredible that Zephyr often didn't report problems until they became critical. "You need to tell me when something hurts," Sarah scolded after discovering that one of the bone restructuring sites had become infected. "I can't help you if I don't know there's a problem." "Pain is familiar," Zephyr replied. "I have lived with it for 3 millennia. This new pain, it is different. It speaks of change rather than damage. Still, communication is important. We're partners in this process." "Partners," Zephyr repeated as if testing the word. "It has been long since I had a partner in anything." As the weeks passed, their relationship evolved beyond doctor and patient. Zephyr proved to be incredibly intelligent, with a mind that had absorbed 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge. He helped Sarah solve engineering problems by providing insights into dragon biomechanics that no textbook could offer. "The wing structure is not merely for flight," he explained during one of their planning sessions. "It is also for communication. Dragons speak with their wings as much as with their voices." "How so?" "Watch." Despite his injuries, Zephyr managed a complex series of subtle wing movements. Even damaged, Sarah could see the grace and meaning in the gestures. "This says greeting between equals. This means respect for wisdom, and this." He attempted a movement that his injuries prevented. "This would say joy and flight shared." "We need to make sure the new wing structure preserves that capability," Sarah said immediately. "Full range of motion isn't just about flying. It's about being able to speak your own language again." "You understand more than most," Zephyr said softly. The comment stayed with Sarah as she worked. She began to realize that what they were doing went far beyond medicine. They were restoring not just Zephyr's ability to fly, but his ability to be fully himself. Every modification, every improvement was returned to him a piece of his identity that had been lost. The turning point came in the 10th week. The bone restructuring was nearly complete, and Sarah was preparing to test the new membrane integration when Zephyr made a request that surprised her. "I want to try extending my wings. Are you sure? The integration isn't complete yet. It might be painful. Pain is acceptable. I need to know if what we have built will hold." Sarah monitored every sensor as Zephyr slowly, carefully, began to extend his reconstructed wings. The new bones held. The hybrid membrane material stretched without tearing, and for the first time in 3,000 years, Zephyr's wings achieved full extension. The sight took Sarah's breath away. Fully spread, Zephyr's wings spanned nearly 60 meters. The new membrane caught the cave's dim light and seemed to glow with internal luminescence. The bone structure was visible through the translucent material, creating patterns of elegant strength that spoke of both power and grace. "My God," Sarah whispered, "you're magnificent." Zephyr held the position for several moments, testing the feel of restored wings. When he finally folded them again, there were tears streaming down his great face. "I had forgotten," he said quietly. "I had forgotten what it felt like to be whole." Sarah found herself crying too. "We're not done yet." "This is just the beginning." "Yes," Zephyr agreed, and his voice carried something new. Anticipation. "Now comes the true test. Now we learn if these wings remember how to dance with the wind." The first attempt at flight lasted exactly 7 seconds. Zephyr had insisted on trying despite Sarah's protests that his wing muscles needed more conditioning. The ancient dragon had positioned himself at the mouth of his cave, spread his newly reconstructed wings, and leaped into the mountain air with a confidence born of millennia-old muscle memory. He dropped like a stone. Sarah watched in horror as 30 meters of reconstructed dragon plummeted toward the rocky slope below. Only Zephyr's quick thinking and powerful legs saved him from disaster. He managed to catch himself on a narrow ledge, wings flailing uselessly in the wind. "Well," he called up to her, his voice carrying embarrassment and frustration in equal measure. That was humbling. It took 2 hours to winch him back up to the cave using cables from Sarah's ship. When he was safely back inside, she gave him the lecture she'd been preparing for weeks. "Your wings are perfect," she said, checking the readings from the stress sensors they'd embedded in the new membrane. "The structure held beautifully, the integration is complete, and the materials performed exactly as designed. But your flight muscles have been dormant for 3,000 years. They're like an athlete trying to run a marathon after being bedridden for decades." "I thought the muscle memory would return," Zephyr admitted. "Muscle memory is real, but it's not magic. We need to rebuild your strength systematically." Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the complex network of muscles that powered dragonflight. "Look at this. Dragonflight isn't just about wing flapping. It's about coordinating hundreds of individual muscle groups in perfect harmony. That takes practice." How much practice? Sarah had been dreading this question. For a human learning to fly an aircraft? Months. For a dragon relearning to use wings that have been redesigned from the ground up? I honestly don't know. Maybe months. Maybe years. The despair that flickered across Zephyr's features was heartbreaking. "Years? But we're not giving up," Sarah said firmly. "We're just changing tactics. Instead of trying to fly, we're going to teach your body how to fly again. Step by step, muscle group by muscle group, until it becomes as natural as breathing." The rehabilitation program Sarah designed was unlike anything in human physical therapy. She studied old dragon texts that Zephyr had collected over the centuries, learning about flight techniques that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. Then she adapted human training methods to dragon physiology, creating exercises that would rebuild both strength and coordination. "Start with this," she instructed, demonstrating a wing position that looked simple but required precise muscle control. "Hold it for 30 seconds, then shift to this position. The goal is smooth transitions, not speed." Zephyr proved to be a dedicated student. Every day he spent hours working through the exercises Sarah had designed. Wing extensions, angle adjustments, membrane tension control, gradually rebuilding the complex neuromuscular pathways that controlled flight. "This is harder than learning to fly the first time," he confessed after a particularly challenging session. "When I was young, I simply knew. The knowledge was instinctive." "That's because you learned as a hatchling when your nervous system was still developing," Sarah explained. "Now we're rewiring an adult brain. It's more complex, but the results will be more precise." The breakthrough came in the 15th week, during what Sarah had intended as a routine muscle coordination test. She had asked Zephyr to demonstrate a complex wing maneuver that would have been used to catch thermal updrafts. Instead of the careful, deliberate movements he'd been practicing, his wings suddenly moved with fluid grace. "Stop," Sarah said quietly. "Do that again." Zephyr repeated the maneuver, and Sarah felt her heart skip. The movement was perfect, not just technically correct, but beautiful. There was an elegance to it that spoke of instinct finally reasserting itself over conscious effort. "How did that feel?" she asked. "Different. Natural. As if my wings remembered something my mind had forgotten." "That's exactly what happened. We've rebuilt the pathways. Your muscle memory is coming back online." Progress accelerated rapidly after that. Each day brought new moments of rediscovered grace as Zephyr's rebuilt wings began to move with their ancient rhythm. Sarah modified her exercises, focusing on more complex maneuvers that would prepare him for actual flight. "Try this," she said, showing him a holographic display of a spiral ascent pattern. "It's based on thermal riding techniques but modified for your new wing specifications." Zephyr studied the pattern, then began to move. His wings carved through the air in a complex dance, creating wind patterns that Sarah could feel even from across the cave. The new membrane material responded beautifully, adjusting its shape to optimize airflow just as she'd designed it to do. "Incredible," she breathed. "Your wings are actually more efficient now than they were originally. The airflow patterns are perfect." "They feel eager," Zephyr said, wonder in his voice, "as if they are straining to do what they were made for." "Then let's give them what they want. But carefully this time." Sarah had learned from the first disastrous attempt. Instead of a leap from the cave mouth, she designed a controlled test. Using cables and pulleys salvaged from her ship, she created a safety harness that would support Zephyr's weight while allowing him to practice actual flight movements. "This feels undignified," Zephyr commented, as Sarah secured the harness around his massive torso. "Safety first, dignity second," Sarah replied. "Besides, human pilots train on simulators before they fly real aircraft. Think of this as a very elaborate simulator." The first suspended flight test was a revelation. With the safety cable supporting most of his weight, Zephyr was able to focus entirely on wing technique. His movements were tentative at first but quickly gained confidence as his wings remembered their purpose. "The airflow is wrong," he said after several minutes of practice. "I'm generating lift, but not efficiently." "That's because you're in a harness in a cave," Sarah pointed out. "Real flight happens in open air with natural wind patterns to work with. What you're feeling now is like trying to swim in a bathtub." Then perhaps it is time for open air. Sarah had been expecting this moment, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. "Are you sure you're ready?" "I am sure that I will never be ready if I remain in this cave," Zephyr replied. 3,000 years have taught me that some leaps must be taken on faith." They spent 2 days preparing. Sarah rigged every sensor she could spare to monitor Zephyr's wing stress, muscle output, and flight dynamics. She mapped out flight paths that would keep him over relatively soft landing areas. She even programmed emergency beacon to activate if something went wrong. "You know," she said as they made final preparations, "when I became a doctor, they taught us to, first, do no harm. I'm not sure dropping a dragon off a mountain qualifies as harmless." "Perhaps not," Zephyr agreed. "But sometimes healing requires risk. And sometimes the greatest harm comes from never trying at all." The morning of the flight test dawned clear and still. Perfect conditions for a first flight, no wind to complicate things, excellent visibility, and thermal currents that would provide lift without turbulence. Sarah watched from the cave mouth as Zephyr positioned himself at the edge of the cliff. His wings were fully extended, catching the morning light like stained glass windows. Every sensor reading was green, every system optimal. "Remember," she called to him, "trust your instincts, but trust your training more. If something feels wrong, abort and glide to the nearest safe landing zone." "Understood," Zephyr replied. He paused for a moment, looking out over the vast expanse of sky that had been denied to him for 3 millennia. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Thank you. Whatever happens next, thank you for giving me this moment." Before Sarah could respond, Zephyr spread his wings and leaped into the sky. This time he flew. For the first few seconds, Sarah held her breath. Zephyr dropped slightly as he left the cliff face, his wings adjusting to the feel of open air. Then suddenly he was soaring, not just flying, soaring with a grace that took her breath away. His reconstructed wings caught the morning thermals perfectly, the new membrane material responding to air pressure changes with fluid precision. Sarah watched the sensor readings on her tablet, seeing power curves and efficiency ratios that exceeded even her most optimistic projections. "How does it feel?" she called through the comm unit they'd rigged. Like remembering how to breathe, Zephyr's voice came back, filled with an emotion that made Sarah's eyes water. "Like coming home." He stayed aloft for 23 minutes on that first flight, testing his limits, relearning the feel of wind beneath his wings. When he finally landed, a perfect touchdown on the prepared landing area Sarah had cleared, his scales were practically glowing with joy. "The efficiency ratings are off the charts," Sarah said, reviewing the data. "You're actually flying better than the historical baseline I calculated from your original wing structure." "I feel different," Zephyr agreed. "Stronger, more precise." "That's because you are. The new bone structure is lighter, but stronger. The membrane design creates better lift-to-drag ratios, and the muscle retraining has given you conscious control over movements that used to be purely instinctive." Over the following weeks, Zephyr's flights became longer and more ambitious. He rediscovered the joy of aerial maneuvers, testing the limits of his reconstructed wings with loops, dives, and complex spiral patterns. Sarah documented everything, creating what she realized would be the first comprehensive study of dragon aerodynamics. "In galactic scientific literature, you're not just flying," she observed, during one of their post-flight analysis sessions. "You're dancing with the air currents in ways that shouldn't be physically possible." "The wings you have given me are better than what I was born with," Zephyr replied. "They respond to my intentions rather than simply my conscious commands. When I think climb, they adjust for optimal thermal capture. When I think speed, they streamline automatically. That's the neural interface integration working. The nanites didn't just rebuild your bones. They created connection points between your nervous system and the new membrane materials. You're essentially thinking your way through flight adjustments." But it was during Zephyr's 4th week of flying that they encountered their first real test. Sarah was monitoring his progress from the mountaintop when her scanners detected incoming ships, military vessels, moving fast and broadcasting challenge codes in what her universal translator identified as Corvin Imperial. "Zephyr, we have a problem," she called through the comm. "Multiple ships incoming and they're not friendly." "I see them," came his reply. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see him adjusting his flight path, rising higher to get a better view. 3 heavy cruisers and a support fleet. They're heading for the mining settlement in the valley. Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd heard stories about Corvin mining operations, strip mining that left worlds uninhabitable, with any resistance crushed by overwhelming military force. "Are they the same ones you fought before?" "No, but they are the same kind. Come to finish what their predecessors started. You need to get out of there. Come back to the cave, we'll hide until they leave." "No." Zephyr's voice carried a tone Sarah had never heard before. Not the sadness of the grounded dragon she'd first met, but something harder. Something dangerous. "They will destroy this world as they have destroyed others. I will not hide while that happens. Zephyr, you can't fight an entire fleet alone. I am not the same dragon who fought them 3,000 years ago," he replied. "And I am not alone. I have something they do not expect." "What's that?" "I have wings designed by human ingenuity." Before Sarah could protest further, Zephyr was climbing, his powerful wings carrying him up toward the incoming fleet with a speed that defied physics. Sarah tracked his ascent on her sensors, watching in amazement as he accelerated past velocities that should have torn conventional wings apart. The Corvin ships detected him quickly enough. Sarah's comm crackled with their transmissions as they shifted formation to engage what they clearly saw as a single, primitive threat. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Zephyr's first pass through their formation was a work of art. His reconstructed wings allowed maneuvers that violated every principle of conventional aerodynamics. He rolled through laser fire with impossible precision, his enhanced membrane material actually deflecting some of the energy weapons through careful angle adjustments. "Sarah," his voice came through the comm, steady despite the chaos around him. "I need you to do something for me." "Anything. Access my ship's old communication array, the one hidden in the deep cave. Broadcast this message on all emergency frequencies. The Guardian of Valdris Prime has returned. Any who would harm this world will face the consequences." Sarah ran for the cave complex, her heart pounding. She'd never seen Zephyr's ship, he'd never mentioned having one. But she found it exactly where he'd indicated, a sleek vessel that had clearly been hidden for millennia. The communication array was ancient but functional. She broadcast the message just as Zephyr began his second attack run. This time, he wasn't just evading their weapons, he was dismantling their ships. His claws, enhanced with the same nanotechnology that had rebuilt his wings, tore through their hull armor like paper. His breath weapon, superheated plasma that could melt steel, turned their defensive screens into useless energy discharges. But it was his flight capabilities that truly shocked the Corvan forces. Sarah watched the tactical display as Zephyr performed maneuvers that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. He could stop mid-flight and change direction without losing altitude. He could accelerate in ways that should have generated G-forces capable of crushing a normal dragon. He moved through three-dimensional space like he was born to it, because now in a way he was. Impossible, she heard one of the Corvan commanders transmit. No organic flyer should be capable of those maneuvers. Surrender. Zephyr's response came across all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of something far older and more dangerous than they had anticipated. Leave the system and do not return. This is your only warning. The Corvan response was predictable. Concentrated firepower aimed at overwhelming their single opponent. They unleashed enough energy weapons to level a city, all focused on the white dragon dancing through their formations. Zephyr flew through it like it was a gentle rain. The new membrane material didn't just deflect energy, it absorbed and redistributed it. Sarah watched in amazement as the dragon's wings actually glowed brighter with each hit, the excess energy being channeled into his own systems. He was using their weapons to make himself stronger. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the Corvan fleet was either destroyed or fleeing, and Zephyr was circling back toward the mountain, his wings catching the sunlight like something out of legend. Sarah. His voice came through the comm, tired but triumphant. I believe we can consider the field test successful. She was laughing and crying at the same time as she watched him approach for landing. Zephyr, what you just did? It's going to change everything. Dragons aren't just flying again. You're flying better than anyone ever imagined possible. No, Zephyr corrected as he touched down, his scales still glowing faintly from absorbed energy. Dragons aren't flying again. This dragon is flying again with wings designed by the most stubbornly brilliant species in the galaxy. What happens now? Zephyr folded his magnificent wings and looked up at the sky, where the last traces of the Corvan fleet were disappearing beyond the horizon. Now I remember what it means to be a guardian, and I think it's time the galaxy met some of my relatives. Sarah felt a chill of anticipation. Your relatives? Dragons, Sarah. There are others scattered across the galaxy, grounded by age or injury or simple despair. Others who have forgotten what it means to fly. His pale eyes gleamed with purpose. Would you like to help me remind them? 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the starship Rising Wind, watching as the 12th dragon to undergo the reconstruction process took its first flight. Below them, Ember, a massive red dragon who had been earthbound for 2 millennia, spread wings that gleamed with the same nanotechnological enhancements that had restored Zephyr. Beautiful, murmured Dr. Kess, the Altarian surgeon who had joined their team after word of their success spread through medical circles. The integration is even smoother than the projection suggested. Sarah nodded, checking the readings on her tablet. They had refined the process considerably since Zephyr's reconstruction, reducing the treatment time from months to weeks and improving the success rate to 97%. The Rising Wind had become a mobile medical facility equipped with fabrication labs and surgical suites specifically designed for dragon physiology. Ember's thermal regulation is off the charts, reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. The new wing membranes are dissipating heat more efficiently than any biological system we've cataloged. That's because they're not entirely biological anymore, Sarah replied. The nano-enhanced membranes are essentially living smart materials. They adapt to environmental conditions in real time. Through the viewing port, she watched Ember execute a complex aerial maneuver that would have been impossible with conventional dragon wings. The red dragon rolled through a thermal updraft, its enhanced wings automatically adjusting camber and angle of attack to maintain perfect control. "Status report from the Kepler system?" Sarah asked. "3 more dragons have responded to our call," Torres replied, scanning her communications array. "Ancient blues who've been grounded since the hegemony wars. They're requesting immediate assistance." "And the opposition?" "Corvan Empire has filed formal protests with the Galactic Council, claiming we're violating the non-interference accords by militarizing a primitive species." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Primitive, right. Because rebuilding a 30-meter flying predator with nanotechnology and giving it energy-absorbing wings is something primitives do every day." The past months had been a whirlwind of discovery and conflict. Word of Zephyr's restoration had spread quickly through both medical and military channels. The medical community hailed it as the greatest breakthrough in xenobiology in centuries. The military establishment saw it as something else entirely: the resurrection of one of the galaxy's most formidable species. Dragons, it turned out, had once been the galaxy's apex predators before they largely withdrew from galactic civilization. They were incredibly long-lived, devastatingly intelligent, and when properly equipped, essentially unstoppable in aerial combat. Most had become grounded over the millennia due to various injuries, age, or simple despair at watching the galaxy change around them. Now they were flying again. "Captain Chen," came Zephyr's voice over the comm from the bridge. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Medical Command. Put it through." The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Martinez, head of Terran Medical Division. His expression was carefully neutral, which Sarah had learned meant trouble. "Dr. Chen, congratulations on another successful reconstruction. However, I'm calling to inform you that the Galactic Council has voted to classify your work as a potential military enhancement rather than medical treatment." "That's ridiculous," Sarah replied immediately. "We're treating injuries, not creating weapons." Nevertheless, the vote was close but decisive. The Corvan delegation was particularly persuasive in arguing that you're essentially creating super soldiers from an already dangerous species. "What does that mean for our operations?" "It means you have 48 hours to cease all dragon reconstruction activities and report to Earth for debriefing." Sarah felt her blood pressure spike. "Admiral, with respect, we have 17 dragons currently in various stages of treatment. Stopping now would be abandoning patients who trust us to complete their care." "I understand your position, Doctor, but orders are orders." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah stared at the blank display for a long moment before becoming aware that every eye was on her. "Well," she said finally, "I guess it's time to make a decision." "What kind of decision?" asked Dr. Kess. Before Sarah could answer, Zephyr's massive form appeared on the external cameras as he approached the ship. His scales had taken on a silvery sheen over the months, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent millennia observing galactic politics. "May I suggest?" His voice came through the comm with that rumbling dignity Sarah had come to associate with dragon amusement. "That we hold a democratic vote?" "A vote on what?" "On whether humanity's greatest medical breakthrough should be abandoned because it makes certain parties uncomfortable." 20 minutes later, the entire crew was assembled in the main conference room. Sarah looked around at the faces of the 37 medical personnel, engineers, and support staff who had volunteered for what everyone knew was dangerous, experimental work. "You all heard the Admiral," she began. "We have orders to shut down and return to Earth. Those orders come from people who are concerned that we're creating military assets rather than providing medical care." "What do you think?" asked Chief Engineer Park. "I think that every dragon we've treated was suffering from injuries that prevented them from being fully themselves. I think healing isn't just about restoring function, it's about restoring dignity. And I think that if the galaxy's power structures are afraid of dragons being able to fly again, maybe that says more about those structures than it does about dragons." Dr. Kess raised her hand. "What are our options?" "3 choices," Sarah replied. "We can follow orders, shut down the program, and abandon our current patients. We can declare medical independence and continue operations without official sanction. Or, prompted Torres. Or we can do what humans do best when faced with authority that contradicts our conscience. We can politely ignore it and keep helping people who need help. The vote was unanimous. Zephyr, Sarah called through the comm. How many dragons are still out there? Scattered across 47 systems at last count, perhaps 100 individuals who could benefit from your techniques. And how many of them would be willing to stand with us if certain parties decide to use force to stop our medical operations? All of them, Zephyr replied without hesitation. Dragons remember their debts, Sarah Chen, and we remember our friends. Then I guess we're going to find out just how far human stubbornness can take us. Over the following months, their small medical fleet grew into something unprecedented in galactic history, a coalition of species united not by politics or trade, but by the simple principle that healing should never be constrained by politics. Dragons provided protection and transport. Human engineers provided technical expertise. Altarian doctors brought surgical skills. Volcari merchants supplied resources, and Kithran philosophers documented everything for history. The Corvan Empire tried 3 times to shut them down with military force. Each time, they discovered that attacking a medical fleet protected by dragons with energy-absorbing wings was an exercise in futility. The dragons didn't just fight. They danced through space with an elegance that made conventional military tactics useless. They move like thoughts made manifest, Admiral Corvan reported after his 3rd failed attempt to stop the medical fleet. Our weapons make them stronger. Our tactics are useless against enemies who can change direction without losing momentum. Request immediate reinforcement. The reinforcement never came. The Galactic Council, faced with the reality of an unstoppable medical mission protected by increasingly powerful dragons, chose discretion over confrontation. 2 years after Sarah first met Zephyr in his cave, she stood on the bridge of the rising wind and watched the 100th dragon take flight. The sky around their ship was filled with wings. Not just the patients they had treated, but their children, their partners, entire family groups that had gathered to witness the restoration of their kind. Status report? She asked Torres, who had become her unofficial second-in-command. All systems green. 98 dragons fully reconstructed and operational. 17 more in treatment. And Sarah? Torres grinned. We're getting calls from species we've never heard of, asking if human medical techniques might work on their people too. Sarah looked out at the dragons filling the sky, their enhanced wings catching starlight like living constellations. Each one represented not just a medical success, but a life restored, a dignity returned, a dream made real again. What do you think, Zephyr? She asked. Ready to help save the rest of the galaxy? Sarah Chen, came the dragon's reply, warm with affection and bright with purpose. I thought you would never ask. In the distance, a new ship appeared on their sensors, a massive transport filled with injured Kithran crystal singers who had heard impossible stories of a human doctor who could restore what was lost. Behind them came a delegation of mere quantum dancers, and beyond them a convoy of species Sarah had never encountered, all seeking the same thing: hope. And as the rising wind set course for their next destination, Sarah realized that sometimes the best way to change the galaxy wasn't through politics or force, but simply by refusing to accept that anything was per